Good afternoon, and welcome to Are You Running? A campaign training for college students. My name is Elizabeth Maddow. I'm an associate research professor at the Eagleton Institute of Politics and direct our Center for Youth Political Participation. True to the mission of Eagleton to link the study of politics with the practice, Are You Running was launched as an extension of our groundbreaking research on young elected leaders. And our aim was not only to study why people run for office or how they govern, but really to build the capacity of young adults to run for office, to encourage them and to equip them to be public servants. We were happy to launch this effort with the League of Women Voters of New Jersey and want to acknowledge them right now. And Are You Running 2022 is going to entail a series of workshops. And today's is going to feature a conversation with young elected leaders from New Jersey. We're coming to you today from the drawing room of the Eagleton Institute of Politics with members of the Institute's undergraduate associates program here in attendance. Thanks to Zoom, though, we've been able to open up our classroom to reach a broader, more national audience of college students. And our ability to broaden our reach is thanks to our colleagues at the New Leadership National Network at the Center for American Women in Politics, who are co-hosting this event today. Today's session is going to be moderated by two Rutgers students, and I'd like to take a moment and introduce them now. We have Sahar Ali Jenkins, and Sahar is a junior here at Rutgers, majoring in women's, genders, and sexuality studies and political science. She has a double major. She's been involved with New Jersey Public Interest Research Group, Rutgers University Black Law Students Association, and she's also a member of the Rutgers dance team. Also, though, an intern with New Leadership at the Center for American Women in Politics. Also very happy to have Ethan Block. Ethan is a sophomore here at Rutgers, double majoring in political science and public policy. He has an economics minor, and he's the outreach director for the Rutgers University Democrats, and he's a student intern here at the Eagleton Center for Youth Political Participation. We're thrilled to have them moderating this discussion. If there's time at the end, we'll have students here in the classroom and students watching on Zoom given the opportunity to ask questions. But for now, I hope you all enjoy the conversation. So I'll hand it off to our student moderators.
Thank you, Dr. Maddow. So we'll just get started with the introductions here. First, we have Brittany S. Hale, Esquire, who's the founder and CEO of B&D Consulting Group. Brittany has a background in securities analysis, risk management, political organizing, people management, and litigation. Ms. Hale earned her BA from Rutgers University Newark Honors College and her JD from Boston University School of Law. Ms. Hale is a former Obama Organizing Fellow and the 2021 New Leaders Council Fellow. In August 2020, she developed the first Municipal Social Justice Commission in New Jersey and currently serves as an executive director. She is presently the first Black woman to serve as president of the Rahway Board of Education. In 2021, she was appointed by Governor Murphy to the New Jersey Human Relations Council Executive Committee. And in October 2021, she was listed as a top 20 millennial on Insider NJ's top 100 millennials list.
Next, I'd like to introduce Councilman Justin Musella. Justin Musella is the newly elected councilman in Parsippany Township, Troy Hills. A 2013 graduate of Emory University, Micella received his BA in political science and worked exclusively in sales within the financial technology services industry. Micella has been active in politics since an early age, having worked as a volunteer on both Governor Christie's campaigns in 2009 and 2013, and eventually becoming chair of the Morris County Young Republicans. Micella was ranked 11th on the Insider New Jersey's list of most influential millennials in New Jersey politics, and was honored by the New Jersey Globe for having one of the best run campaigns of 2021. Having been involved in local organizations for almost a decade, Micella has actively participated in street cleanups, food banks, and taken an active role in the local chapter of Kiwanis, an organization that services the most vulnerable in his community. Micella strongly believes in helping a new generation of leaders find their voices in the state of New Jersey and is eager to be a leader in this effort.
Our next panelist is Councilman Quinton Law. Councilman Law is from Moorestown, New Jersey. He was elected in 2021 as the youngest and first Black council member in his town's 340-year history at age 23. Quinton has led on policy initiatives around supporting the local economy, protecting the environment, and uniting his community. Quinton also works as a staffer in the U.S. Senate for New Jersey Senator Cory Booker. There, he specializes in the veterans and criminal justice issue areas. Before working on Capitol Hill, Quinton worked on campaigns of all levels, from presidential to city council. Quinton is a first-generation graduate of Bryant University with a degree in economics. While at Bryant, he was an honor roll student, Division I athlete, and the recipient of the university's prestigious Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Award.
Next, I'd like to introduce Councilwoman Kathleen Ceracola. A lifelong resident of Waldwick, Katie Cericola graduated from Waldwick High School and earned a Master's of Science in Professional Accounting and a Bachelor of Science in Accounting from Seton Hall University in 2016. Professionally, Katie worked as a KPMG as an external auditor and has since moved into the private industry as a manager of the internal audit at a pharmaceutical company based in Bergen County. Katie is a varsity cheerleading coach at Ramapo High School and a dedicated volunteer in the community, previously serving as the Bergen County Young Republicans chairwoman and corresponding secretary of the Bergen County Women's Republican Club. Katie was elected to the Waldwick Borough Council after a competitive race and began her 3-year term of Councilwoman in January 2022. I want to thank all our panelists for being here with us today. And with that being said, I want to get our discussion started. So our first question is, what inspired you to run for public office? Was there a specific event, or were you asked by others? Or was running for office always your goal? Would Councilwoman Ceracola like to answer first?
Sure, thank you so much for having me. So a few things inspired me to run for office. I was always politically involved ever since high school. I was always that kid in high school that the teachers and kids would be like, oh, this kid is into politics, and like thought I was weird about it. But yeah, it's always been an interest, and I just see the need to protect the future. And I think that it's important that young people have a seat at the table, because a lot of the time, and a lot of my experience so far, I've seen that most people are a lot older than me that are making the decisions. So I think that it's something that all young people should get involved in.
Thank you. Would Councilman Law like to speak on those next?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you to the program for having me on the panel today. My story is a little unique. I was actually asked to throw my hat in for an appointment after we had a member of our council resign unexpectedly. So in 2021, I was appointed into my seat, and then I had to run a special election after that to keep it, which was an experience in itself. But I would say one of the big, deciding factors for me when it came to making a decision if I wanted to, serve on council was essentially the fact, and the councilwoman before me previously mentioned this, the lack of representation. For years and years and years, no one like me, no one as young as me has ever been involved in that decision-making process. And as someone that, I'm a third generation member of my community. My family's been here for over 50 years. So it emerged as an opportunity for me to continue to serve at another level, but take it even deeper and provide representation that we haven't had ever. So that's how I got to this point.
Thank you. Councilman Musella, would you like to speak next?
Yes, I would. So first and foremost, I want to thank the Eagleton Institute for having myself on today to speak about some of the lessons that hopefully you all will get a bit of value out of, and obviously want to thank my
Okay, we'll come back to Councilman Musella. President-
And
President
Can you hear
Brittany,
me?
would you like? We can hear you now.
okay, great. The Wi-Fi connection is a little unstable, so bear with me. But to answer your question, the reason why you run is to make a difference in the lives of the people that you serve at the local level. And here in Parsippany, we have a lot of big issues that are affecting people that we know who are friends and family. And you decide to make a difference because if it's not you who's going to do it, who else is going to do it? And so when you're faced with a problem, you can either be proactive in trying to solve the problem or you can complain about it. And I decided to do the former rather than the latter.
Thank you. President Brittany Hale, would you like to speak next?
Sure. So, good afternoon to everyone. And the reason why I ran, I always say, is I'm nosy, right? So, initially, when I first moved to Rahway, I was looking to get to know people, and I saw that local politicians were not really active within the community and really lacked a substantive presence where potential voters were, right, which was social media. So at the time, I was developing marketing strategies for my clients, and I went to the local Democratic committee for the county and laid out this very ambitious social media rollout. And they just kind of looked at me and said, okay, and nodded. And he said, my goal was to really speak to an untapped source of voters. They were allowing to the senior centers, which was fantastic, but most of the younger people were online. And so a few weeks later, I received a call from the mayor, and he said, I heard I'm supposed to meet with you. What are you interested in? And I spoke about education and advocacy. At the time, I was also tutoring kids within my community, and I wasn't satisfied with their lack of love for learning and really their approach to education. So similar to the councilman, I decided to not only identify the issue, but to go about addressing it. So that's how I ended up running. Never thought that I would run, but here we are.
Great. Thank you all for your answers. So now that we've talked a little bit about some of your motivations for running, we're going to get into the actual process of campaigning, mainly some of the obstacles that you faced as a young person running for public office. So President Hale, if you'd like to start with that.
Sure. So the first time that I ran against 6 other people. There were 7 people running for 3 slots. And I had the facts that I was a young woman with no children running. I was not born in the community in which I was running. Neither of those were requirements. You only had to be 18 and live in the community. But people were very provincial, and so that was brought up as issues. I was seen as weird by some of my competitors. They thought it was weird that I was a woman who had no children and wanted to run. And my response to that in debates and in the public discourse was, yes, I don't have any children, but I have to live with yours, right? So it's incumbent upon me to make sure that the community is providing children with resources to tap into their potential, and make sure that they are provided with the means to make good decisions and to be, to realize their potential and become service-oriented, self-sufficient human beings, adults, right? So those were some of the issues that I'd faced. And again, it was whether it's social media attacks during debates, these were a lot of things that I particularly faced. And I tried not to take it too personally, and I wanted to get to the heart of what the resistance was, right? So all that boiled down to was lack of familiarity and fear. And once I made it about addressing those issues, it became a lot easier to to deal with some of the personalities while running.
Great. Thank you. Councilman Law, if you'd like to go next.
Absolutely. So there were, as I mentioned earlier, I was appointed into the seat. So I was serving while having the campaign and doing all that for the first time. So for my peers on the call, they know that each is its own learning, journey, and they're completely different when it comes to campaigning and actually serving in the position. But having to do that at the same time was probably my biggest obstacle. But even before getting into that, I ran into a lot of imposter syndrome. I was, in the seat. All of a sudden, I went from being an activist and organizer in my community to on the other side of the dais. And you're thinking, how can I best serve everyone in my community? I've promised that I'll work tremendously hard to bring every voice to the table. That was what was running through my mind. How can I live up to the expectations that I know, the young people that are excited to see me in this seat have for me? And that was, a little bit of a learning experience. There were learning curves there, but now we're a year in and I feel like I have my feet under me. But I would definitely say that the biggest challenge for me was balancing campaigning with also putting in the time to make sure that you're an effective council person and you're, moving policies forward. Because one thing that I like to say all the time is, if you're not the one moving your issue forward, sometimes no one's going to be the one to do that. So if you have to be your strongest advocate when it comes to the things that you're passionate about, especially when governing and being a young person in government, because sometimes, being that young person and bringing, new ideas or creative things, like President Hale said earlier, you can get shrugged off, which is frustrating. But with time, you learn how to navigate.
Great, thank you. Councilman Micella, if you'd like to go next on some of the obstacles you faced campaigning.
Sure. So I think a lot of what Brittany and Quinton said are accurate. That when you are a young person, you will have this older guard that will be very skeptical about what you have to offer their community, because they will think that their way is the best way and that you should be seen and not heard. It almost feels like the proverbial time growing up in Thanksgiving where you had to be on the kids' table at Thanksgiving and you were basically just pushed into the corner. So as a young person, particularly breaking into politics, what you have to keep in mind is that you have your own unique value to offer people. And that the issues that you'll face will be, you are too young, you don't have enough experience, you don't know the issues, you haven't lived here as long as I've lived. And then, what I would remind people is what I lack in experience, I make up for in commitment. And you have to show that commitment through action, by repeated and massive amounts of action, through the door knocking. In my own personal campaign, I knocked on well over 6,000 doors, and that consumed a lot of my time, being every single place, every single event, and just showing people how badly you wanted it. And then really, honestly, just ignoring all of the criticism. You're going to receive criticism from people in your own party, the other party, people who won't even vote. And the best thing that you can do is to remind yourself why you're doing that, what your purpose is. And as long as you stay true to your purpose, a lot of the other issues that you'll face when you campaign for office will pale in comparison.
Thank you for your answer. Councilwoman Cericola, if you'd like to finish.
Sure. I'm basically echoing the same things that everyone else just said. I think it's kind of a shame that all of us were met with these obstacles or these similar obstacles. I think I also wanted to shake things up, and I was often met with a lot of hesitation and pushback from the older guard, as Councilman Musella just mentioned. So, my party had been doing the same things the same way for many decades. And when someone questions that, then, they get a little defensive. So you really do have to be professional about it and, work with people to make them understand that what you want to do is for their benefit. And, we need to evolve with the times, and it shows that if you're passionate, you really shouldn't back down on what you believe in.
Thank you so much for all of your answers. I know you all touched upon it a little bit, but we wanted to ask you specifically, have you faced any criticism for being young while running or while serving? Councilwoman Cericola, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think I got a lot of flack from adults who only knew me as someone that was their kid's age, or, oh, they went to high school with my kid. Those were a lot of the same comments I was getting when I would see people out at the store or out at events. And it is really frustrating because it's sort of discriminating against me, saying that I don't have enough experience, or just because of my age that, I'm just someone that their kid went to school with, when really I want to be your councilwoman and I want to make the right decisions for the town. So I think that's what was one main thing.
Thank you. Councilman Law, would you like to speak next?
Sure. And I love that I get to go in the middle and I don't have to do the double answer. So this is but for me, I would say, and I'm sure this is similar to everyone else on this panel, you're too young, what do you do? I'm a staffer in the US Senate. I can't tell you how many people are like, so what exactly do government staffers do anyway? And you're like, well, we serve veterans, we serve working families across the state. And it actually served as a great opportunity for me to segue into, oh, that's, great question. Let me lay out what your, US Senator can do for you. I faced a criticism about that, and the reality is I graduated from college in 2019. So at the end of the day, I'm realistic about the fact that, I don't have my own business that I ran for 20 years. I ran against a very wealthy businessman that was known in town, had his own, franchises of businesses that he ran for 30 years. That was always the contrast that people would make. They would say, oh, you're up against this guy that knows, allegedly somewhere in the council, job description, it says you have to run your own business. I always would joke and say that, but what it takes is, I would always remind people that, it's about listening, and I don't have, a plethora of years of experience, but I like the councilman said earlier, I make up for the lack of experience with commitment. And we have the time, we have the energy, we're dedicated to this community. So I definitely have received those criticisms, and I still receive them to this day. But I learned that the best way to take those is to take them in stride, take them with class, and to recognize that the reality of it is that you are a young person, but you prove to people that when you put in when you put in the time, do your homework, and show that you actually care, people are like, oh, wow, this person is in it for the right reasons.
Thank you for your remarks. And Councilman Musella, would you like to answer next?
Yeah, thank you. I always try and play whatever your perceived biggest weakness is, turn it into your biggest strength. And in Parsippany, now, and being able to talk to voters and tell people that I believe that there's time for younger people to come in with new blood, new ideas, new ways of thinking, and people that are going to push the ball forward, that will implement good practices for our township, getting rid of some of the outdated ways we have of serving residents that have just been questioned. For instance, one thing that I caught a lot of flack for, but is a very common practice, is offering office hours to residents. People will always say, don't rock the boat. But then, if you don't rock, if the Titanic would have been rocked, it could have maybe missed the iceberg. So I think that the best thing is that whatever your challenge will be, especially if it's your age, find a way for people to resonate with that as a unique value that you would add to your respective government. And the most important thing is that, look, you're never too old to learn and never too young to teach. We know things about social media. We know things about getting more done with less, especially if you're millennial. That was the way to describe my college experience. And at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for your remarks. President Hale, would you like to finish off the question? I think you're still muted.
I think she has too great of an answer. Zoom does not want everybody to hear what it is.
If you would like, we can come back to you with this question a little bit. Thank you.
Great. So we can move on to the next question, and then President Hale, when you're ready, we can come back to you with the other one. But so we've spoken a little bit about obviously some of the criticism that you all faced, but when you actually got to office, I'm curious what sort of advantages you found yourself having over maybe some of your older colleagues. You know, what was it about being a younger person? Like, what assets could you bring to the table because of your youth? Councilman Law, if you'd like to start.
Absolutely. I remember the first time I talked to our mayor about TikTok, and I was like, you know, there's this app where I was just trying to explain it. I found myself, I was like, I can't believe that, you know, this is what we're doing. But it was one of those things where I think one of the biggest assets that I brought to the table as a young person was creative solutions. I think that, you know, it was said before that, especially in government, sometimes things can get done a certain way for a very long time. And due to the fact that that's happening, that allows complacency to creep in. And then there sometimes, and this isn't for everybody, but in some cases, we no longer look for creative solutions to problems that we've had systemically for years. So I think my biggest asset was bringing creative solutions, but also bringing energy. One of the things that I campaigned on and I was really focused on was bringing new people into the fold and bringing new people into the civic engagement process, specifically young people, specifically underrepresented people, you know, people of color in our community. And one of the biggest positives out of that initiative and that focus was everything from, you know, not just council meetings to our campaign events to township events. You know, they became more diverse in age, more diverse in race, faith. You know, that is what is most important to me. The fact that we've increased our council meeting attendance by 30%. The fact that, you know, more people are just showing up, asking questions. That's when government works the best. When you have people that are actively engaged and actively participating. You know, that I think that is the first step to being not only just being a successful elected official, but, you know, being proactively solving problems in your community as well. So I think having younger people come to council meetings and, you know, that type of thing was a huge asset. And when I'm out, you know, at township events, people come up to me and mention that often.
Thank you for your answer. President Hale, are you good to go?
Yes, thank you. My monitor went off, and so I was unable to unmute, but, you know, finding power in the pivot, right? So the thing that I was going to say is I come from an industry where no one ever retires, right? Attorneys don't retire. So you have people who've been litigating for longer than I've been alive. And so I'm a Black woman with blonde hair and a high-pitched voice, okay? I don't fit the mold of what a lot of them believe an attorney should be. Similarly, in politics, you have people who also have preconceived notions of who should be participating, who should be leading initiatives politically. And so whatever those preconceived notions are, I do tend to flip them on their head. So again, with coming in and being a leader within the Board of Education, what was most important to me is providing opportunities. So that looked like developing a mock trial program where kids could learn critical thinking skills, advocacy skills, public speaking, and also petitioning the state, right? So making sure that we received and continue to receive an additional $6 million in funding. So like a lot of others have said, I try not to get too tripped up about what others think about what I look like and, you know, some of those preconceived biases that we may hold, and instead just produce results. Because again, you know, you can argue with optics, but you can't argue with results. So for some of those difficulties, that's just something that I wanted to circle back on.
Great, thank you. Councilman Micella, if you'd like to talk next.
I actually froze a little bit. Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. So we're just talking about some of the advantages that you've found yourself having being a young person serving in office, some of the assets that you bring to the table.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've governed exactly asking the hard questions about why are we giving pilots to developers to come develop our town when we have a lot of vacant office space? Why are we raising the water rate on our residents by almost 40% in the middle of a pandemic? Why are we creating these jobs at town hall that serve no purpose to the taxpayer? So running a campaign that moved as fast, asked those questions, that was as dynamic as ours, and I had referenced it earlier, I was very honored to receive the spotlight by the NJ Globe. And that's exactly what I've brought to office, is asking those questions as to, you know, not all good practices are good right now, especially what was good in the 1980s and the 1990s. Town hall. If you ask me to fax anything, as the population changes, there needs to be services that make sense to them and are provided in a way that is compatible. Since New Jersey's changing, just as Parsippany is changing, it's getting more younger, it's getting more diverse, and we need to make sure that the services are reflective of that a town can offer. And then in my own personal capacity, is looking at a lot of the committees. Outside of your own town council, there's committees that you appoint people to serve on, for instance, like economic development. And many of these appointees had been political appointees who may not be a great fit for that committee. So I have really been instrumental, along with my other colleagues in council, in getting new people involved in the civic engagement process, because you need a lot of new people who are experts in things that you're not experts in. You know, for instance, I thought I was an expert in politics before I ran for office. And then when I was running, all I knew was that politics began with a P and ended with an S. So it's good to have people that can help you along the journey, that are experts, and help you with the task at hand.
Great, thank you for your answer. Councilwoman Cericola, if you'd like to finish.
Yeah, I find myself echoing some of the same things again. I think the two main things that I bring to the table right now are energy and a questioning mind. So I think when it comes to energy, I found it really important to go to every event, listen to every resident I could. As Councilman Micella said, door knocking is so key to campaigning in local elections. And you really would be surprised at the great ideas and the suggestions that residents have, and even the complaints, because then you can go into office and hopefully make changes for them if they're the right thing for the town. So I think also showing up to events, even if it's an event with 2 people, 5 people, you never know who you can impact in that event. And then they're going to go and tell their neighbor and their 5 family members and then their friends and everything like that. So it really is a chain reaction. And I think being young and having energy to go to these events, and something that maybe people weren't doing in the past, it really does make an impact. And as for the questioning mind, it's so important to question things in government. We're all paying a lot of taxes. We live in New Jersey, so every dollar matters. And I think, if we're wasting, $5 here, $1,000 there, and you can save that by asking a question, then it's definitely worth it.
Thank you so much for your answers. We're going to move on to the next question, which asks, what have you learned since serving in the office? How has your view of elective office changed from campaigning to governing? Councilman Ceracola, do you want to start back up?
Sure. So the main thing that I've learned is that government works very, very slow, even slower than I expected. So we'll come in with a great idea or a suggestion or something that we want to get done, and it takes months, and it's very frustrating. I come from private industry, so it's a lot different. So you definitely have to have patience, but I do think that there are ways to streamline processes and things we can do to make things move quicker. I think a lot of things are also set by statutes and past practices. So like we keep saying, it's important to question things, and hopefully we can speed things up in government.
Thank you so much for your answer. Councilman Law, would you like to answer next?
Absolutely. So one thing that I like to say all the time, and I said it a little bit earlier, was that, good leaders don't act like they have all of the answers. And the reality is you won't have all the answers. There will be times where you weren't aware of the water main that burst on 2nd Street back in 2009 because you were in high school. There's going to be times when, you don't know about the park that hasn't been built. And there's been a special interest group for 10 years that's been working on it. And there's all these like minute details that you just might not understand. So what I learned is that you have to lean on your community. You have to lean on people and be honest about what you know and what you don't know. And most of all, people want to be heard. When you listen with empathy and show, hey, I'm not gonna tell you what I need, what you want to hear so you can elect me, when November comes around. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, tell you where I'm at in that process and how I believe that we both can find a resolution that works best for our community. And when you listen to people and when you not just showing up, because there's a difference between showing up and being present, but actually being present for the people in your community, because they can tell. They can tell the difference between showing up for a photo op or showing up just so you can take a picture and showing up and listening with intentionality. So I think the biggest thing I learned is that you have to listen with empathy, try to put yourself in other people's shoes, and most importantly, understand that there's going to be things that you don't know, you are not always right, and have the humility to say that. You're not going to lose any votes because you're willing to say, you know what? I'll get back to you on that. I'm gonna go and double check with the township manager or the township solicitor, and I will get back to you with the accurate information. And people respect that, and that has allowed for me to have much success when trying to move initiatives forward and working with people in the community with any issue that they have.
Thank you for your answer. Councilman Musella, would you like to answer next?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest observation I've had, and I've always been in sales in the private sector, so I've always been used to a very high pressured, fast paced environment to do things as efficient and economical way. And probably getting elected to government, you see the reverse is true in almost every single instance. Government is moves like an aircraft carrier. Things are very slow to change in either direction, and people in government, and I'm not blaming them, but they have been programmed to do things in as an uncorrupt way as possible. Whereas you might be trying to do something that is good for your community, for instance, to get something done, such as simple as maybe developing that local park. And then you'll find out that you're up against all of these rules and regulations, not just at a local level, but then compounded with any statewide rules and regulations. It makes it very difficult. So you have to be extremely energetic, and you have to know the issues. So before you go telling somebody where you stand on an issue, you might, by virtue of a state mandate, be unable to help that resident, which is something that I've had to learn the hard way. So I think that when it comes to local government, and as it goes up throughout the chain, you see how inefficient and unfortunately ineffective it can be when you're trying to do good for your community. Not in all cases, but from my initial experience, that's been the assessment so far.
Thank you so much for your words. And President Hall, would you like to finish off for us?
Oh yeah, Hale. I think the thing that I've learned in government, one, Quinton had it exactly right. I don't know is not your kryptonite. It's a means by which you can build trust with the community. And it's much harder to walk back inaccurate descriptions, right? Or falsities that you've shared, than it is to say, I don't know, and I'll get back to you. And then lastly, one of the things that I learned is government can't do everything. There's a reason why we have different branches. And because government, as the councilwoman said, moves so slowly, at times that's when you want to bring in allies that can help speed that along, right? That's when you want to engage the community. So when people come with a complaint, I'm happy to provide information and provide them with the resources available to them to support the change that they want to see, right? Because it's a group effort. So those are the things that I've learned.
Great. Thank you all for your answers. So we have one more prepared question for you. And real quick, we are looking for just some words of advice or encouragement for young people who are thinking about running or who want to run in the future. So do you have any sort of advice for what young people can do to set themselves up for electoral success in the future? And we can start with President Hale.
I will forward some words that were forwarded to me, which is stop approaching your power with humility. Very often we think we're too young to add the adjective, right, to make change. And very often you'll be presented with, a lot of wait your turn, right? Okay, be in this position, wait your turn, 20 years, we'll see what's happening. And very often that does a disservice to your unique value add. And so there are some times where, again, you want to benefit from having that community, but also understand that the community that you're coming from is usually untapped, and the existing institutions want you for a reason, right? It's because you offer something that they don't have. So be very clear on your unique value, be very clear on what you're looking to add, and don't play too much into that sense of sitting back and waiting for permission for someone to give you the opportunity to be in spaces you would like to be in. ideally it happens that way, but it doesn't always. And so by demonstrating your value, you can create that impact and perhaps, amplify the positive impact that you're looking to bring.
Thank you. Councilman Law, if you'd like to go next.
Yes, thank you. I have a few words, some just more general, others campaign focused. But I would say, stay connected to your community. And that sounds really cliche, right? But we live in a political environment where it is really easy for people to try to take national issues, and especially as local elected officials, like everyone on this panel, use them as wedge issues to divide your community on things that frankly have nothing to do with your zip code. So, remember that you need to stay local, know what are on top of the minds of people local. And it's not always what's on MSNBC or Fox News. It's what's on your patch website. It's what's on your tap into website for all my New Jersey Politico, people in here. So just keep that in mind, and always remember that, there's always going to be a reason not to run for office. There's always going to be a reason not to throw your hat in. The time is never quite right. I won't lie to you, there are times where you're like, wow, this is the right time for me to jump in and do this. But the time is never quite right. And if you're hesitant, you'll always find a reason not to do it. So my recommendation would be to believe in yourself. Know that you are qualified. There is no job description online for what you have to be an elected official. What you have to be is a good leader that listens with empathy and is connected to their community and focused on their community. And you have to show up for people and stand up for people. And like I said earlier, being present, because people can tell when you're not being genuine and you're not being present. And last but not least, I tell everyone this. Horizontal networking. Everyone imagines networking as something that's so vertical. I have to connect with the CEO. I have to connect with the congressman. I have to connect with, my manager. But that's not always the case. Sometimes the most meaningful connections are the people that are sitting next to you in your room right now. Maybe the person that you did an internship with, the colleague that you work with, at your job now. Those are the people, and especially, for this, for Eagleton, everyone that you're in class with, I will bet my bottom dollar is bound to go on to do something very, very great and very inspiring. So just remember that, to horizontal network, get the most out of your relationships and show up for people so they'll show up for you later down the line. But that's all that I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Micella, any words of advice for young people who'd like to run?
Yeah, the best words of advice come in the form of a story. When I initially decided to run for office, I thought it would be, an easy primary. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I had to beat out nearly 6 people for 2 slots. And at the darkest part of that primary, I felt like I was being torn in a million different directions. So one of the best things that I did was I sought the advice of somebody who actually did the job and was universally respected. And I had told them, I said, I feel like I'm being pulled apart by everybody that wants me to conform to their expectations as to what they perceive to be as a good idea as to how to do the job. And then that person told me, he said, you can't do and you can't be everything to everyone and be true to yourself. And I think that it's really important that you need to be true to yourself and your issues that you run on. I think the councilman was 100% spot on. When you run for local office, don't talk about national issues. They're wedge issues that you can't do anything about. You're not going to win over the hearts and minds of people, because at the end of the day, there's no Democrat or Republican way, as they say, to pick up trash, to plow the streets. And the best thing is to just do it. If you feel like that you have a unique perspective that is currently lacking in local office or county office or state office, throw your hat into the ring. You don't need anybody's permission. You don't need to get to kiss the ring of anybody. Just go and do it. Get off Facebook. Unfortunately, get off TikTok, but go knock on people's doors and go ask them, how do you feel our town is run? Do you feel like you're getting your money's worth for all of the money that you send to town hall? And if you feel like you're the right person for the job, then chances are you probably are. So that's the best piece of advice that I could give to anybody is, number one, be true to yourself. Don't be afraid to tell people no. Don't be afraid to challenge people with differing perspectives to see it your way. And then number two, if you feel like you should be in that seat, go run for it.
Great, thank you. Councilwoman Cericola, any last words of advice?
Sure. The first thing I want to say is definitely don't wait. Step up now and take an active role if you believe that this is something that you're interested in. I know that we mentioned a lot of obstacles and issues that we faced in our campaigns, but I do believe that now more than ever, young people really are getting their shots. So definitely take the world up on that now. I think the second piece of advice that I'm sure you've heard 100 times is network. I know everyone tells you this, but it really is worth repeating. And you never know when some random person you met 5 years ago at an event might be just the person you need to solve a problem or to bounce an idea off of. And finally, I think a lot of people get caught up in national politics and they don't really realize the impact. I know, as Councilman Micella just mentioned, about picking up your trash and the things that really impact your everyday life. And, you know, those roles are very important. Your town council, your board of education, you know, it's not as glamorous as being a US senator or congressman, but these local roles really are incredibly important. So if you're thinking about getting involved, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope I can help you out in any way I can.
Great, thank you all for your answers. So at this time, I'm gonna turn it back to Dr. Maddow, who has some audience questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. And this was a great panel. Really appreciate all the young elected leaders who joined us, and definitely want to applaud our students for moderating the discussion. I know it's not an easy thing to do. So really happy to have you all here. We have one question. I know we're short on time. So we have one question from one of our undergraduate associates. You could just ask right there, Jose, if you want to ask.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for coming and talking to us today. My name is Jose Zerazua. So my question is, what does it feel like to have all eyes on you when you step into rooms that historically might not have been made for people like you to be in? And this question is for President Hale.
Hi, and thank you for your question. So as I mentioned, both professionally and personally, it was kind of par the course, right? So I very often was a trial attorney before going full-time into my business. So when I went into the courthouse, most of the people who looked like me were clerks and certainly weren't attorneys. However, I did it, right? So the issue, I didn't have an issue in that because it was very clear in who I was. And I knew that I was there to do a job, and I decided that other people's opinions of me or their perception of where I belonged was never going to matter as much as I thought I belonged in the value that I could provide. And more importantly, the value that either my clients or the community that I serve got from me being there. So whether it was a courthouse or whether it was sitting on the board and leading the board, I understood that in my community, there were people who were relying on me to be there. So our community's super diverse. We have about a third in terms of white, Black, and Latinx students. And so we have a significant population of students who were Spanish speaking. I myself am Spanish speaking, so I knew that that was going to be top of mind in making sure that we provided resources for parents who maybe didn't want to participate in some of the resources we provided to parents because they didn't speak English. I knew that it was important for all of our students that administration and staff, right, principals, vice principals, teachers, looked like them, understood them, right, and were able to perceive them in a way similar to the way that they perceive themselves. And so whether other people thought I belonged there or not, my dedication was rooted in that commitment. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much.
It's a great question. Does anyone else, any of the other panelists want to address that question? Maybe I can hand it back off to our students. I know we've got about 5 more minutes, and I think they have a lot of questions that came in. So either Sahar or Ethan, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take it away. We actually had a question here. The question was, how do I get started if I have no experience? Councilman Law, would you be able to answer this?
Absolutely. So like I said before, and I'll say it again, there is no prerequisite for how much experience you have to have. My recommendation would be talking to stakeholders in your community. One thing that was really helpful for me was getting in touch with my local municipal party, and also understanding the political lay of the land for my town and my area of South Jersey. So that on top of talking to, the owner of the president of the business association, the chair of the environmental advisory committee, some of your community leaders, just talking to them about, how they feel that the government has been serving them and what issues are on the top of their mind. So when making when getting involved and making those connections, you're also learning and understanding, okay, this is a kind of how things work, and this is how I should navigate, the environment in my community, if I did want to run for office. But if you're just looking to get involved, my absolute first thing would be to identify community leaders and just reach out to them, ask them to grab a cup of coffee and talk a little bit about the business association. You'd be surprised about the conversations and the things that you'll learn through those conversations.
Thank you so much for your answer. We actually had another question. Our question was, what was the hardest part about switching from a campaign volunteer to being a candidate? Councilman Musella, would you be able to answer this?
That's a great question. And when you go from a volunteer, you're observing other people do the job. And then when you go to become a candidate, you go in thinking that since you have the anecdotal experience of watching other people do it, you know all of the answers. And then you figure out that you don't really know what you don't know. And the best thing that you can do is listen to people. Listen to people who have done the job at a high level and who are regarded as having been great servants, and hear what they have to say. I think that Councilman had a good point. Talk to people in your community. Listen to what their wants and needs are, so that way you can make a better determination as, am I the right person for the job? Because when you go from a volunteer to a candidate, all of the responsibility is on your shoulders. There's no excuse making. There's no passing the buck. Everything that happens to you, whether you caused it or not, you own it. And that's a really big difference, going from a volunteer to being a candidate.
Great, thank you for your answer. So we have a couple more questions. For President Hale, one from the audience. I've been asked to run for school board from my local district. How do I justify to voters they should vote for me even if I never attended those schools?
Thank you. And I believe that was Matthew. And so my response to that was, it's not a problem at all. It's just an experience you had that you had no control over, right? And this is really just a strategy question. And the way that I would go about it is to ask, what resources did I have available to me in private school that I would like to bring to the public experience, right? What are some of the gaps that are there that I think I can fill based on my experience? So again, with me, I came to a community where being, Rahway born and bred was 90% of the talking points for most of the other candidates. I didn't have that experience. I couldn't go back and, tell my parents where to give birth to me. But what I could do was think about what I was seeing there, how my experience contrasted, and the value that I could bring based on my own experience. So for example, one example was the mock trial program, right? That wasn't something they had, was something that I was able to bring, as well as petitioning for funding. We are chronically underfunded, and figuring out what can we do about that? Who do we need to speak to in order to provide value? So Matthew, I added it in the Q&A as well, and I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much for your response. We have time for one more question from the audience. And the question we wanted to ask was, how did you keep your values intact while campaigning and serving? Councilman Ceracola, would you be able to answer this?
Sure. So I think if you're in it for the right reasons, then you can't really go back on your values, right? You need to make sure that you have your values established before you run for office, because there's going to be so many people throwing things at you and telling you that you should do it this way, or you should think that way, or this is really what, is right for the town. But if you have your values established and you feel confident in yourself and what you believe, then I think that will reflect and make sure that you don't compromise those values for, a political deal or something that's definitely not worth compromising your values for. So I think that definitely just being confident in yourself and making sure that you are able to express that to other people and express to other people why those are your values.
Great, thank you. So unfortunately, we're out of time, but I did want to thank all of our panelists for doing such an exceptional job and answering all of our questions. I'd also like to thank the Eagleton Institute of Politics and the Center for American Women in Politics New Leadership National Network for co-hosting this event.
Thank you again for everyone. We also just want to let everyone know that the next session will take place Tuesday, March 8th at 3 o'clock via Zoom. And the information will be learn the ins and outs of working on a campaign with political operatives, featuring Dice Davis and Scott Moraldo. You can also follow the Center for Youth Political Participation on social media. So you can follow it on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the reminder.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.